Whether you're a die-hard football fan or not, you must have admired the FIFA World Cup held in Qatar in November 2022. This event, held every 4 years, has established itself as the biggest sports carnival in the world. Football-playing nations get a chance to host this super prestigious tournament on a rotation basis. But do you know what was special about Qatar hosting it? Well, it was the first time the World Cup was held in the Arab world, and after the 2002 tournament in South Korea and Japan. It was the second time the whole event was held in Asia. But what you also need to know about is some of the shady goings-on that played out behind the geopolitical curtain. In this video, I'll take you through Qatar's political and economic intentions of hosting the most popular World Cup on the planet. Let's get right into it. Such a big event could possibly bring Qatar a lot of advantages, and those advantages would go far beyond the sports industry. Building infrastructure to welcome and accommodate visitors will have a significant beneficial economic impact on the nation. More than 1.5 million new jobs were reportedly generated in important industries like construction, real estate, and hospitality as a result of the hosting of the FIFA World Cup. The gathering was also advantageous for the tourism sector. Qatar's economy will profit long-term from the increase in visitors in 2022, in addition to the immediate effects of raising the country's international profile as a tourist destination. According to officials, the World Cup will draw over 1 million visitors and bring about QAR 66 billion to Qatar's GDP by 2025. However, beneath the glitz and the glamour of the major event and the state-of-the-art, extravagant stadiums, there are some sinister tales that Qatar would prefer the typical football fan not to know. The tiny Gulf nation went on a stadium-building spree to host the Cup in as grand a way as possible. But for that, it had to bring in thousands of migrant laborers who were made to work day and night without much regard for human rights. This was one of the things that made the tournament highly controversial. The fact that Qatar is an Orthodox Arab country, and it preferred sticking to its fundamental doctrines, didn't go down well with the liberal Western democracies. Its anti-LGBTQ+ laws turned into a hot topic during the World Cup. International fans were informed they cannot wear rainbow shirts, and national teams face sanctions for donning rainbow One Love armbands. A Qatari official went to great lengths to make anti-LGBTQ+ remarks rather than attempting to contain the situation. But queer rights were just a tiny controversy in the tiny Gulf nation. Qatar, which spent over $200 billion in preparing for the tourney, couldn't even save its relationship with its neighbors, due to what they say is an oppressive regime. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Bahrain, and other nations in the Middle East serve diplomatic relations. The Arab Brethren also alleged the Qatar supports certain terrorist organizations. This phenomenon of covering up one's dirty linen with glitz and glamour of sports isn't new, and it's called sports washing. Oppressive regimes and dictatorships have been organizing sports events like the Olympics. You get to see wonderful opening ceremonies, hundreds of athletes passionately competing for their countries, and spectators from all over the world having a great time. Even though Qatar is essentially a desert, it managed to spend more than $200 billion just on the World Cup, constructing 7 new stadiums, brand new roads, and a new metro system. Even the imported grass they've cultivated has air conditioning installed to maintain it. Many people would believe that all of this money is worthwhile, and that the World Cup is a very lucrative event given that FIFA is the most popular sporting event in the world. The profitability portion is untrue, even though it has a great deal of sentimental value. Both the World Cup and the Olympics do not immediately bring in money to the host country. The host is responsible for paying for all the extremely expensive infrastructure projects, but FIFA is the one who actually receives all the significant revenue from ticket sales, merchandise, and advertising. In the case of Qatar, the waste is more glaring, since it isn't a traditional football-playing nation like, say, Brazil. Immediately after the World Cup, these stadiums turned useless. So why did Qatar host the FIFA World Cup despite it being such an outrageous financial waste? What is Qatar's hidden geopolitical strategy behind this World Cup? We must first grasp Qatar's vulnerabilities in order to comprehend this complex story. The tiny nation's greatest issue is an excessive reliance on oil and gas. Only energy and gas account for nearly 60% of its GDP. But recently, there have been increasing voices in the world calling for action to stop the impending perils of global warming and to combat climate change. By 2050, 4 of the top 6 oil consumers worldwide want to attain net zero emissions. Given that the cost of renewable energy has already begun to fall below that of fossil fuels, The demand for oil will drastically decrease. Qatar can therefore only rely on oil until 2050. The geographical location of Qatar is the second issue. Now, if you look at a map, you'll see that Qatar is encircled by enemies on all sides. As you can see, these nations, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, are not your typical competitors. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are two of the world's most powerful energy producers. Qatar has only been able to survive up to this point thanks to a US security assurance. The United States is likely to remove its protection in the following 30 years when oil and gas are no longer valuable, leaving the tiny sheikdom vulnerable to the aggression of its neighbors. There are only 22,000 soldiers in Qatar's tiny force. Therefore, its second significant challenge is to develop a different geopolitical leverage tool. In reality, every country in the Middle East, not just Qatar, is attempting to diversify its economy in order to reduce its crippling reliance on oil reserves. For the same reason, the majority of OPEC members are working on massive diversifying initiatives. Dubai is the pinnacle of global cosmopolitanism for the UAE, which has developed into a financial and transshipment center. Saudi Arabia's vital access to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal has also secured the country's economic future. The Suez Canal carries 30% of all container traffic in the globe. Thus, if Saudi Arabia ever decides to start taxing all ships, it will be able to generate income from sea tolls, opening up a new stream of income. Qatar, however, doesn't have any geographical advantage, and it is nowhere close to the UAE in terms of diversification. Besides, the world perceives it as no more than a desert country, unlike the UAE, which has some jaw-dropping infrastructure. Hence, its third big challenge is to improve its global image in order to attract foreign investment. However, Qatar lacks any physical advantages and is significantly less diverse than the United Arab Emirates. In addition, it is viewed by most people as nothing more than a desert nation, in contrast to UAE, which has incredible infrastructure. Therefore, its third major challenge is to enhance its worldwide reputation in order to draw in outside investment. So, do you see any connection between these problems and the World Cup hosting? I'm sure you can see a lot of sports washing in this grand tournament. To improve the picture of the host nation in the eyes of the global audience, public relation tactics are used. Qatar wishes to demonstrate to the world that it is a completely developed and modern nation, not just a desert that has